Hello everybody, it's been a minute since I reviewed a game. I haven't really been playing anything that's that recent, so there hasn't really been a lot of reviews, but we just went ahead and beat 12 minutes on stream. This is a game that I've been very excited for. I think it was shown right around the same time as Deathloop, and both of them had around the same concept and of like this time loop that the character's in, and you're trying to break out of the time loop. Obviously very different games gameplay wise, but the mechanic itself interested me greatly, and this was several years ago at E3, and I've been anticipating this game ever since. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys my review. I believe this game is like $25, 25 or 30. I played this on Game Pass, so kind of free for me. At least that's how I view Game Pass, because there's so many ways to just get it for virtually free or maybe $1 at the most. So I'll go ahead and evaluate it at both price points though. I'll evaluate it as a game in Game Pass, where I'll be a little bit more lenient, and then I'll evaluate it as like a $25 title or $20, however much it is. If you were to buy it on like PlayStation or something, right? I think it's on PlayStation. So it took me around 5.5 hours to play the entire thing. I think average completion for the game sits at around 6 hours, 6 hours and 6.5 hours, around there. So that's what you should kind of aim for. And overall, I enjoyed my time playing the game. Let's get into some pros and cons. Number one pro, the actual time looping and stuff like that. The grandiose concept of the game is extremely entertaining. You have, it's called 12 minutes, but really it's more like 5 minutes. And don't worry, I'm not going to get into any spoilers here, but you essentially, the vast majority of what you're repeating every time is the first 5 minutes. And then you have up to 12 minutes before you loop. So, or if you die or whatever, obviously you loop. So, the number one question going into it is, how the hell can you make a 6-hour long game where you're looping the same 5 minutes or 12 minutes every time interesting? And for the most part, they do a pretty decent job. It's impossible to do the entire game in one loop, because you need to, it's a puzzle game at the end of the day, and you have to, find out more and more knowledge each loop. Some loops will give you information you need for the next loop, and etc. And I think it feeds into itself pretty damn good. And for the most part, I didn't need any help or anything. There were 2 spots in the game where I did look it up and use a guide. One spot I just could not figure out what the hell it was. I'll 100% admit it. And so I used a guide for that. It was about midway through the game. And then at the very end of the game, I used a guide again. And the solution to that was something I wouldn't expect, because it was essentially to just do something I had already done, but do it over again. So that just didn't even click in my mind, like, oh, do that thing over again. Didn't even click that way for me. So I looked it up, and then I was like, oh, okay, I just have to do the thing over again. So 2 points where I used a guide, which might explain why my playtime's a little bit faster, because I'm terrible at puzzle games. But in the pros, the concept is fantastic, and it does a pretty damn good job of staying consistently entertaining. The voice acting is tremendous here. James McAvoy, Daisy Ridley, and Willem Dafoe, 3 all-stars. Well, 2 all-stars and Daisy Ridley, but she's pretty early into her acting career, so she'll hopefully be as iconic as these other 2. But I mean, if you guys have ever seen a fucking movie, I'm sure you know who Willem Dafoe is, right? The guy has a crazy ass looking face. You could tell him instantly. James McAvoy is an extremely talented actor as well. You guys probably know him from the X-Men stuff, or from Split, or whatever. And And all three of them, though, Daisy Ridley, obviously, most people know her as Rey from Star Wars. All three of them fire on all cylinders for the acting. I thought it was really, really good. The voice acting is definitely the star of the show. The actual soundtrack of the game, the music and stuff like that, is pretty standard, run-of-the-mill, accentuates certain parts of the game, but for the most part, there's not actually a lot of music going on in the game. It's just you, your thoughts, and trying to figure out what the hell to do. And that brings me to the actual gameplay of it. I found it mostly interesting. At the end of the day, this game is essentially a point and click. And I don't think a lot of people, including myself, expected that going in, but that's essentially what this game is. It has an isometric camera view, you know, the camera up above looking down. You actually do click to move your character. You click on various things, you gather items, you can combine the items to different effects and place them in different spots in order to solve puzzles. It's literally straight up a point and click adventure like you would play back when I was a kid or even earlier, right? In the 80s and the 90s, like those old school games. And if you like point and clicks, this is a pretty damn good one. It's not nearly as crazy hard as like a Grim Fandango or Myst or anything like that. If you don't like point and clicks, which I don't usually, I think it still is fairly accessible. I think that on a scale of 1 to 10 for puzzles, I think this game probably sits at like 5, like a pretty average, not that hard. There's some things that it might take you a couple loops to get, but I found myself mostly knowing what to do or having fun experimenting. And I think the length is fine. I think it does run on a little bit too long, but I think the length is fine. And I do like the fact that you can't do it all in one loop. It takes multiple loops, and you're constantly paying attention to every little difference so that you can hopefully learn something new for your next loop. Let's get into the negatives, though. I do think the game is overpriced. I don't think this is a $25 title. I don't think... There's no replayability to this game at all. Absolutely none. This is a one and done. And it's obviously going to come down to your price to playtime ratio. Everybody has a different one. For me, though, a non-replayable 5.5 hour or even 6 hour game like this, that its gimmick starts to get a little gimmicky by the end of it, I don't think it's worth $25 personally. And talking about the gimmick, the whole looping, sometimes it does get frustrating, man. And it's getting frustrating because, and you can argue, oh, it's supposed to be frustrating. He's frustrated. He's playing the same thing over and over. Okay, sure. That doesn't make it any better, though. It still makes it frustrating, right? It's like the argument when you're playing Resident Evil 8 and Ethan's like, man, I still have to go through this area. And people are like, oh, see, it's fine that you have to still go through this shitty area because the character also thinks it's a shitty area. It's like, no, that doesn't excuse it. It's still a shitty area and you don't want to play it. And that's kind of what ends up happening in this game, is like the gimmick starts to get gimmicky. It starts to wear on, and you have to replay a little too much of the stuff over and over and over again. And I finish it pretty fast. So if you're 6 hours or 6.5 hours, you're replaying stuff even more. It's going to get even more tedious for you. Yes, that's the point of the game, is the character is supposed to, find it tedious as well, but it does end up just getting a little bit frustrating by the end of it. And one thing that lends to this frustration is most of the time the game is really good about letting you skip shit that you've already heard. I played on mouse and keyboard, you can just click and it'll skip the dialogue to the next dialogue. You can just keep clicking and skip it. Or sometimes the character himself will actually just summarize it if you've said it all before. He'll be like, listen, I know you're going to say this. It's this, this, and this. That is fantastic when the game does that. It feels natural. It feels like something that the character would do. When it doesn't do that, though, and it doesn't do that for several parts, and you just have to keep replaying them and just clicking through, it is really frustrating to just have to keep clicking through this dialogue, and every time it's like 30 seconds. Like, even skipping the shit still takes a little while. 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, every single loop, you know? It gets a little bit frustrating. And then just to talk very, very generally about the overarching story, I wasn't a fan. I'll be honest, I was not a fan. I can't really talk about it without getting into spoilers, and I don't want to talk about spoilers, but all I'll say is the actual story that they're trying to tell is very interesting at first. Then it gets less interesting, and then by the end, it gets really uninteresting, at least to me. I found myself falling off hardcore. By like hour 5 or like 4.5, I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to do here. I understand what they're trying to do, and I'm just not digging it. I'm not digging what they're trying to pull off here. So keep that in mind. Overall, I think this game is fantastic if you play it on Game Pass. I think as a free game or a $1 game off Game Pass, this is definitely worthy of your time. Don't be afraid to pull up a guide if you are stuck on a loop, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and there's plenty of fantastic games out there that you should be playing, so there's nothing wrong with using guides to help you get over little hurdles a little bit faster so you can get to playing more video games, which is always good. I would say for Game Pass, this is easily like an 8 out of 10. Good time. Great. Even. But if you're paying $25 for this game, honestly, I'd say it's like a 5 out of 10. Like, it's average. You might even enjoy your time, but at the end of the day, I think that's a little steep for what you're getting. Me personally, I thought it was like a bit above average. You know? I thought it was a bit above average, but unfortunately, the story that they're trying to tell, I just didn't really vibe with. So that comes down to, you know, a subjective, how you feel about the story. And I didn't really vibe with it. Didn't really vibe too much with the point and click nature of it. So for me, I'd say it was like a 6 out of 10 personally. But I think that if you like these types of games and you're on Game Pass, easy 8 out of 10. If you're buying it, I don't know, man. If you really like point and clicks, I'm sure you'll like it. But, yep, that'll do it for me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.